Hello, everyone, and welcome to Franchise Supplier Network Supplier Discovery Day. This is part of an ongoing series we do at FSN, and today's topic is going to be employee recruitment. This is a topic I'm super excited to dive into, especially because of how important it is this time of year. It's really going to align really with what your needs are. Employees are the pillars to any business, and it's really important to have the right ones in place. So these folks are going to kind of go through different strategies and tactics on how to help you achieve that. Before I go into introductions, I want to go ahead and introduce myself and FSN if you don't know already. My name is Jake Fishman. I'm the VP of Business Development at FSN, which is essentially a resource for the franchise community. We are matchmakers for franchisors and suppliers to connect and find the perfect match. Now, the best way to get use of FSN is to go to franchisesuppliernetwork.com, go ahead and fill out a needs assessment, and someone from our team will go ahead and reach out and get you the help that you need. The other thing that we're involved in is events. We host 3 events every year. One out in Springboard, which is in Philadelphia. It's 750 plus attendees. We have another one in Chicago, hosted. It was actually founded by 2 other members of FSN, my brother Zach and Ryan Hicks. It's for the younger generation of franchising, really help it evolve for the future. And last but not least, my favorite conference of the year, Unconference, which is coming up in March. If you like to network, ski, that's the place to go. It's in Park City, Utah. Super fun conference. All that information is going to be on franchisors.com. So go ahead and check it out there. Enough of me talking, though. I want to go ahead and dive into this Discovery Day and start with introductions. So let's pass the floor off to you, Ross.
Okay, thanks, Jake. So my name is Ross Weissman. My company is Epic Managers. My background in franchising is I basically grew up in franchising for the last 15 plus years. My family was involved very early on with 2 great brands, Massage Envy and European Wax Center. So I had a front row seat at both the RD level and as a multi-unit franchisee in multiple states to see what it took to grow really great brands nationally, and learned a lot along the way as an RD alongside the franchisor, the strategies to grow top line revenue and royalties, and as a multi-unit franchisee, all of the joys and pains of running stores in multiple states, sometimes thousands of miles away from where we were based. And that all led us to building systems to ultimately get best-in-class results in our network and best-in-class performance and turnover results. And we decided we wanted to make that available to other franchisees since we saw the same challenges popping up constantly with people. And so we made those people systems into a company that is now Epic Managers. So it's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross. Neil?
Yeah, Neil Young, the founder of Two Ladders. Our ultimate goal is to source applicants for companies to hire direct, looking through processes, friction points. Our goal is to turn the HR cost into a business investment. And so being able to show the front end ROI of the money being spent and what it's garnering for individuals on the back end with their app flow, it gives them a true value to what their money's bringing to them at the end of the day when it comes to new hires and retention as well.
Great. Thanks, Neil. And last but not least, Anthony.
Hi, thanks, Jake. My name is Anthony Andre. I lead the franchise vertical at PandoLogic. We're a Veritone company. I've been in the talent acquisition marketing space for about 30 years, I hate to admit. But what that's given me is really a firsthand view into really the evolution of marketing channels to source candidates for employers. So I've been at PandoLogic now for about a year and a half, and hopefully be able to share a little bit about what we do and how we do it as we go through the conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And for all those that are listening, watching, this, the way we were really going to be running this is we're going to just, all these guys, they really work well together. And that's why I was so excited to bring these three together, kind of all facets of the employee recruitment side of things. So this could be great. So the first person I want to start with is you, Ross. I kind of want to dive into kind of the more managerial roles and kind of how to fill that out, because of how key it is for any franchise location to succeed for the long term. So the favorite conversation we're going to bring up is joint employer. Franchisors tend to be very cautious to implement systems, trying to get too involved with that type of stuff. So keeping that in mind, what strategies do you think can be employed by franchisors at the same time staying cautious with joint employer?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. I think zooming out a little bit, great franchisors know that their long-term value is built when the franchisees are successful. And that's both your royalty growth as well as license sales. And that's why they have giant staffs and ultimately hire a bunch of people like FBCs and DFOs to support their franchisees' execution and growth. But if they ask their FBCs what the main challenges are in the network, they will tell them that 95% of the time it is to do with the manager that's running those units. And franchisors stand to gain the most from being able to upgrade the manager talent within their network, but it's a bit like pushing on a rope. They really can't do much, especially because of co-employment, to reach inside those businesses and directly affect who those managers are. So a lot of it becomes DIY systems. And speaking from experience as a franchisee, we were wooed by the fancy ATS. But I think evidence has shown after the last 20 years that just having a good ATS and being efficient does not close the expertise gap in terms of finding great managers. And that's no surprise because it's a steep learning curve. And I'm sure no franchisor sells a license telling a prospect that they have to be an expert in people. So there's also the challenge of franchisees having plenty to deal with that prevents them from going deep and creating a good people system to hire, find great managers and keep them. And so for a franchisor, having a done for you option rather than a do it yourself option for finding a great manager would be a great tool to make available to your network. And that's why we built Epic Managers as an agency that specializes in recruiting managers for franchise, because we can cross borders that a franchisor can't. We can help those franchisees directly. And basically franchisors can partner with us to make us available as a service to their network so that we can help upgrade that manager talent.
Yeah, and I love that point because, it's not just with employee recruitment. It's more with just everything. Like franchisees don't get involved into a system because they are amazing at hiring. Like they're business owners, they're entrepreneurs. So, hiring people that are experts in that is the way to go in order to find the best possible people. And I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that because, to your point, franchisees are entrepreneurs and they're great at many things. Kind of to what I just said is, they didn't come into franchising because they're expert hirers or whatever the word is. They use their intuition for a lot of things, and sometimes hiring it needs to be not with intuition. It needs to be a structured process. So just kind of elaborate more on the importance of having a structured hiring process in place.
Yeah, I think this comes back to, the value that a franchisee can see from having a great manager, and the best franchise operators are already there. They know they need great managers and that when they have them, their performance is exceptional. They have low turnover and they have much higher sanity. And the challenge is that the recruiting environment has been changing. And I'm sure, like my colleagues will talk about here on this call, it's a very involved process where you have to have all the parts and pieces in place. But it's like any other sales process. You have a funnel of people, and there's a lot of moments where you're either going to continue to convert that person all the way down the funnel, or they're going to fall out. And you need to put the whole puzzle together and not just have a piecemeal strategy. So thinking in terms of systems is really important when you're hiring. Luck is not a great strategy. For the first 7 years of having our own locations, we certainly ran on luck, and every so often we did get lucky and hire a good manager, but it's not a good long-term strategy. It's not really a strategy at all. And you see the best returns with your stores, and over time, they compound when you have great leaders in place and you have less change happening. The problem with a lot of DIY things is it's piecemeal. The magic is in the whole puzzle. And first and foremost, you have to build a human recruiting process where you're fast. And we like to think about it in terms of speed to a human conversation that someone is having, not just automations, and that the candidate experience matters. And all of that is a part of this structured hiring process. How many times, have you been to the doctor's office where you have to fill out the same intake form for the 8th time and wonder why they can't seem to save this information in their system? The same thing will often happen in unstructured hiring process, where they're going through multiple interviews as a candidate and they're answering the same questions over and over. It's not a good look for the franchisee's organization. And so putting your best foot forward involves having a carefully thought out process. That includes eliminating bias in the individuals that are involved in your process, not necessarily just inserting a multi-unit manager of yours that really has not much training in how to interview. And that's why a lot of times it does come down to finding expertise to do these things, because franchisees have a lot on their plate. There's only so much time they have to go deep on creating a good people system. So the structured hiring is important. If you can't do it yourself, find some experts that can do it for you.
Totally. And that kind of goes into what I wanted to ask Neil, because, having a structured hiring process is really important, because a lot of the time it's just, you don't want to rely on luck and throwing, it's just going to, relying on luck is just not going to help you in the long term. And having a structured process is going to set you up for success, and it's going to be more of just a blueprint for you. So Neil, talk through a structured hiring process and how you can kind of adapt to the different types of job applicants you have, because different brands are going to have different applicant pools. So go through kind of that process.
Yeah, I think it's important. We encourage any of our clients to really go through their own hiring process. And I think that's going to be a consistent topic here, is the process itself. When you think about friction points, individuals, I don't think that they understand what is causing individuals to fall out of the process itself. And so, with 70% of the workforce being passive or inactive, someone that's interested and probably very qualified, making them jump through a lot of hoops to get all of the information that you're going to get on the back end of the process anyways, really becomes a deterrent. And so what we really try to talk about is, give an individual enough to raise their hand and say, I'm interested. Get enough information from that individual to have an educated decision on whether or not you want to push them through the process and bring them in for an interview. And then when you get to the point where, okay, you've shaken hands and you're going to hire and move that person through, then put the necessary paperwork on them. I think for the longest time, the old thought process is, if an individual is willing to work here, they're willing to go through the process we want to put them through. Those days are over with. And, if you think about job boards and you think about all of the easy ways for an individual to quick apply, the competition really has kind of been pushed to that platform or those platforms, because if an individual can apply for 5 to 10 jobs in 5 minutes, then all of a sudden really it becomes first to that person, right? And so there's just a lot of things to think through on, you know, what would you want if you were applying for a job? And you know, when you're going after the 30% that is actively looking, you know, those individuals are going to be more apt to go through a tiered step process because they need a job. But if you're looking to skill up your workforce, or you're looking to find individuals that are more qualified, you're not finding them there. You're going to have to tell the story and then get them to understand the brand, the culture, the things that they're maybe not getting now in current state. And then give them a simple way to say, I'm interested, and then start the conversation. Like Ross said, you know, the quickest step to a human conversation is really it's going to win over most of the competitors that you're competing against.
It's funny. Like, the first thing I think about when you say that is, like, whenever I'm like talking with like customer service or something like that, like the first thing I was like, okay, connect me to an agent, connect me to an agent. It's the same thing with employees. Like, you don't want, like, you really want to talk to that human person. And that's really going to be the key to success. And it's that stat you said, and I actually, when you first told me this, I was amazed that, you know, 70% of the market is not actively looking. It's wild to me, because it just shows that there needs to be a more diverse way to get employees, instead of relying on one and going just Indeed. Like, so many people I talk to are like, I'm only on Indeed. And then, like, what about the other 70%? Like, that's kind of always what I say. And it's just crazy to think about that. Anthony, I do want to shift gears a little bit, you know, and go to kind of more efficiency, kind of more back to what you were saying, Ross, is like about how, you know, you want to be, franchisees are super busy. They have a lot on their plate. This is not top of mind a lot of the time, and efficiency is key. So, Anthony, I want you to talk through the benefits of programmatic recruiting and that process and efficiency it can bring.
Sure. You know, it's interesting, because I think all of these conversations are going to dovetail nicely together with perspectives from the three of us on the call. Yeah. You know, we focus on very much the top of the funnel recruiting. You know, so in terms of efficiencies, there's really, you know, two ways we look at it, both in time and money. Right? To Ross's point, I think earlier he mentioned that, or maybe it was you, Jake, that franchisee operators are much more entrepreneurial as opposed to recruiting experts, right? I think that same logic applies to, you know, HR and recruiting professionals, is they're not necessarily marketing professionals. And that's where our tool set comes in. When you think about what an organization has to do to recruit, right? There's messaging to be developed, there's advertising to be distributed, a whole host of task-oriented bits to get that done, right? So the two ways that we can impact an organization's efficiency are automation and leveraging our data insights. We've been in this business for over 15 years, have data on both how candidates look for jobs and how well all the job site publishers perform. So where we can help save time, you know, is really making all those upfront planning, advertising decisions to get your job offer in front of candidates, right? So job board publisher selection, how do we allocate budget across what is now a really huge landscape of options? You know, you mentioned Indeed, but there are thousands trailing behind Indeed, where that audience is split across all of them. So how do we target those specific audiences that you're looking for? How do we address geographic differences in marketplace competitiveness for talent? And how do we measure, assess, and optimize what we do in terms of reaching those candidates in real time? Our technology does that. So when you think about the impact, we can offload all of those tasks from the teams that do this in your organization today, whether that's a skeletal HR staff or GMs who are not necessarily recruiting experts either, right? And leveraging our data, which really reflects the nuances of the talent marketplace, to be able to create advertising programs that generate talent or candidates in a manner in which that fits your business model, whether you need, candidates much faster or consistently over time. We can turn the dials on our technology to be able to deliver, talent flow, that feeds the needs and can be modified geographically as necessary based on an organization's needs changing. So, two ways: automation and leveraging data to understand really the marketplace that you're trying to attract. Excuse me.
Yeah, and leveraging technology and automation is so key. Technology is definitely a play for, when you have this busy business owner and they have a million things to do, but they need a constant pool of applicants coming in. Automation is the best way to get the most people in the door. And them able to see data is, okay, so this is working on this job board, and maybe they're not getting as much success on this. You want to make them as efficient with time, but also with money. You don't want to be spending money where you're not seeing success.
Totally. Exactly right. Yeah.
Great.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter which source they come from,
as
long as they're walking in the door.
100%. And your clients, they don't care where it's coming from. They just want them coming in. Awesome. Thank you for that. Neil, I want to go back to you and this is kind of goes to what I was talking about at the beginning with Young Conference. It's the younger generation in franchising. Everything's evolving, and a lot of things. And Neil, you were there. A lot of the things that we talked about, all the panels on kind of appealing to the younger generation. There's more and more millennials and Gen Z people joining the workforce. So with keeping that in mind, how do you bridge the generational divide in the workplace?
So I don't want this to be statistic heavy, but there are definitely some things that you want to look at here. When you look at Gen Z, one of their top 5 priorities is a seamless applicant process when it comes to applying for a job. 4 out of 5 candidates say that the experience that they have when applying is an indication of how they'll be treated by that employer. So, if you think about it from that stance, and I was at Young Conference, you said that, I sat there for 2 days, 3 days, and I listened to all of these different tech solutions that made customer experience a priority. And then, so how can customer experience impact my cash register? For 2.5, 3 days, I didn't hear one person talking about tech solutions for a good user experience when it comes to applying for a job. And so when you think about that, 80% of individuals, when they have a bad experience, are going to tell the people around them. And so if you're not, so if you think about that, all of a sudden, the perception of your company becomes what the individual saw from a negative stance. 50% of those candidates will actually stop frequenting that business based upon the experience they receive. Now, from a franchise standpoint, that's a huge number when you think about it, especially if it's a restaurant business or something of that nature. If an individual is upset because they applied for a position and maybe they didn't get a call back, maybe it was just as simple as, we're rejecting you for these reasons, that individual walks away with a really bad taste in their mouth. And so, being able to communicate, being able to give those individuals an experience that they're used to. The thing to think about is by 2025, the vast majority of individuals that are applying for positions are all going to be digital natives. So they're not going to know anything other than I'm going to use my phone or something of that nature to apply for a job. And so if your processes don't match that, the days of hiring my dad are over with. I'm going to stop by, pick up an application, fill it out, drop it off, and I'll go through the process from there. And so you really have to think through the same way you would think about customer experience and what it means to your bottom line. You have to take that same stance from the beginning with your workforce.
And it's funny because I think about when you said picking up applications. The first job I had, I actually had to go into the restaurant and pick up an application and write it with pen and paper. But that's just the days of that happening. It's just over, and especially with the Gen Z. And this kind of goes into my next question. Like the Gen Z generation, they're so technology heavy, and you'll just lose them if you have them go through a tedious process. And they just work, I don't care. I'll find another opportunity. And
well, it's very instant gratification. I mean, we all have that. You said that a while ago. I mean, it's one thing to go through a process online, but how many times do you, like you said, make that phone call and you're like, I just want to talk to somebody.
mm-hmm.
And in reality, and this is what we've seen over and over again, if you take the time to talk to that person up front, they're going to have one or two questions that are going to do one or two things. They're going to qualify themselves in, or they're going to qualify or disqualify themselves out. And so when a person thinks, when a company thinks, I've got to have all of this information because it's going to save me time. In reality, if you would have picked the phone up and just had a quick conversation with that person, the time savings is going to be in that real quick call, because they're probably going to have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What is work-life balance? What are my benefits? The one or two key things that they really want to know. And then from there, you're on to the next step. And so those are some things that I think get lost. And it goes back to, if customer service is such a focus, then why aren't you looking at the same aspects of applicant service, I guess, getting people through the process as quickly as possible and seamlessly as possible.
Totally. And a lot of the time it's just the simplest questions too, like work-life balance and all that stuff. But there's something about reading that people just don't like doing anymore. I don't know. That they just give up and just kind of go on to the next one. That's quicker.
Well, we also see this too. Like there's pre-qualifying questions they're in in these application processes, that if you really read them, they're set up to be confusing for whatever reason. And I think individuals at times will almost disqualify themselves because they think that they don't meet that qualification. And if it's just a simple phone call to say, here's the question that I have, I think that you want all of this information up front, right? Because you want to make the best decision on hiring someone that's qualified. But I think at times you're actually, it's a deterrent to qualified people, because the guy down the street's applicant process was easier, and people are just jumping out.
It's unfortunate it's like that. You don't want it to be like that, but it's unfortunate that sometimes that is the decision-making process of people.
And you mentioned it earlier, if they don't have time because they're running their business, they want that process to make it as easy on them to look at and say qualified, disqualified. But in reality, it's doing more of a disservice to what they're trying to accomplish.
Total. And that really, that's a good transition right there of time. I think that's a very common theme with this, is having the right time. And this is another unfortunate thing is with the younger generation, and it's ghosting, which is a big thing. And people are taking time out of their day to do interviews and all that stuff. And ghosting does happen. And then what do you do after that? Then you reschedule, or you have to go out and look for another one. So Anthony, I want to hear from you on how Pando approaches to ghosting. And pretty much it comes down to candidate quality, really. Absolutely.
No, you're right. And I think, if I look back over my career, right, I'm going to date myself here, but, Jake, you mentioned about you looking for a job. When I first started looking for a job, you found that job in the Sunday classifieds, you mailed in your resume, right? And the time frame for response was, if you were lucky, 2 to 3 weeks, right?
Right.
The technology has changed that, to where if you're not reaching a candidate, in 48 hours, that candidate's gone, particularly at the lower levels, right? So part of it, I think, is a balance between leveraging technology and direct outreach, right? So, there's a lot of tools out in the marketplace. We have some too, that fall into sort of that conversational AI chat scenario, right? Where you can accelerate that process and capture some of that pre-qualification criteria that may not necessarily be present on a candidate's resume, right? So, if you're able to get that outreach, that personalized outreach back to that candidate within 30 minutes of application, you're well ahead of the competition, right? So when you deploy those types of tools, right, not only do you get better information for your recruiters and GMs to act on, but you're starting that hiring process almost immediately and engaging that candidate on a one-to-one basis, using technology, which for the younger generations is a little bit more applicable, right? But it also gives them the opportunity to opt themselves out too, which is almost like showing a little bit of respect to the candidate and not forcing them to go into your model. And examples of that are, when can you work? Those types of things. That provide a little bit of insight into the potential flexibility of the hiring organization, right, to take you on as an employee. So I think, when you look at addressing ghosting, right, it's almost the exact opposite of that black hole phenomenon that existed with the advent of applicant tracking systems. You apply and then you never hear back, right? If you're not quick enough to candidate, then you lose that candidate. Right. So the idea of coupling a lot of these efficiency tools really is designed to help you get more out of that investment that you're using to fill the top of your funnel, because you're getting more value and more touch points with the candidates that you do actually attract with those dollars. So ideally, when you flow down, and you look at down funnel outputs, you're reaching the better quality candidates faster. You're progressing more of those through your process, and ideally bringing more into the organization to help drive your business over time.
Totally. And it's like hiring employees is it's so similar to marketing and lead funnels and all that stuff. It's essentially the same thing. And like and it's the same conversation with a brand, say and you're a marketing company, it's the marketing company's fault if they're not getting quality leads in. But in the end, you ask, okay, how quickly are you reaching out to these leads? And if it's more than 48 hours, then there's a reason why your leads aren't quality. And it's the same thing with employees. Like if you're not reaching out to them, there's 2 other companies that have already reached out and scheduled time.
Oh yeah, and I think Ross can probably contribute to expanding upon that. But the better hiring manager or the better managers you have, the less turnover you have in rank and file. But at the same token, if you're able to outreach quicker, and get the higher quality of the rank and file, then your other HR related investments, training, et cetera, go down because the length of your employee tenure is extending. So there's post hiring benefits, that you can actually begin to capture once you start to be potentially a little bit more strategic about your upfront hiring efforts.
Totally. Yeah. So Ross, wanted to go to you next as well, because it's interesting with you, because like managers, they work on kind of both sides of ghosting. Like sometimes even the manager can be responsible for ghosting, but they also are the good managers, when they're already hired, they have to deal with that as well. So I want to hear your points on this.
Yeah, we've all been ghosted and wondered, is it us? Definitely something that we've gone through. And I think the point, Neil made this point earlier, these are digital natives, and they want to find the best opportunity for themselves. But they also know this is a numbers game. I saw one stat recently that on average, a Gen Z individual looking for a job is probably applying to 50 jobs. And that's because we're in the age of one-click apply. Also something that Neil talked about earlier. I mean, this is the swipe left, swipe right, let me just, get a quick read, quickly put the feelers out, see what comes back to me kind of strategy. And I think it's a good strategy. I mean, you can't blame the candidates for doing that. They want to put as many irons in the fire as they can. And it just comes down to a simple equation. On the top, it's, what's the prize they get? How good is the compensation for that role? Do they feel that the organization would be a good one to work with? Are they professional? Was the candidate experience during the interview a good one? Because it is indicative of what it'll be like to work with that organization. That's a first impression. And is the company actually interested in me? What's the likelihood of me getting this role? I think that plays directly into how fast they hear back. Because in the other part of the equation, it's how long is this process going to take? And did they show interest in me quickly, or did another company reach out first? And I'm already 80% of the way through the process with them. By the time I heard from the, company number 2 or 3, I'm probably going to just continue to follow through with the first company. How many processes do I want to have to start over with if I think I'm going to get this job? And then how difficult is the process? How many hoops am I jumping through? Am I going through interviews that's like the doctor's office application where I'm filling out the same questions 8 times? It all matters when they're doing the calculus of which company should I commit to. And it's all part of that funnel like we've been talking about. I think the bottom line here is the major factor is speed, because in this day and age, the hire slow, fire fast adage is dead. At least the hire slow part is. You can still fire fast, but you need to hire fast as well. And just having a long process for interviewing does not equal being thorough automatically. You can have a thorough process and be fast. And that is the trick. Knowing what you should be looking for, knowing what a good high potential candidate looks like, and having that expertise makes all the difference, because you can make good decisions quickly. And in this day and age, that is critical, especially when you're looking for top talent and you want the best people for, what your money can buy. You've got to be first. You've got to be quick. You've got to be clear on what the value proposition is to them, and be consistent. And all of that matters in having a system for hiring.
Yeah, and it all goes back to the structured hiring process. And, the hiring process is the first thing these candidates are seeing. So that you want to wow them with that process. So then they're like, okay, so this is a very organized and process-oriented company. So it's having that in place is going to make it more appealing for them to join.
Definitely.
Yeah, and one thing that I'll add to this, because we look at ghosting in the form of no call, no shows with a lot of our clients. Being able to look at similarities of these individuals that are either ghosting you or no call, no showing you is super important. We spend a lot of time analyzing unqualified and rejected apps because if we can understand those individuals, that allows us to, tailor messages and or move money into different areas that would mitigate these no call, no shows. So zip codes, prior work history, age and demographics. Obviously, you can't discriminate age discrimination with digital targeting. But one thing that you can do is you can position your company brand. You can position your messaging to attract individuals that do show up and ultimately are hired and then retained. And so if you can understand what those individuals that are going through the process and are successfully being hired look like, it does allow you to change the way that you're communicating your messages to individuals in the market to hopefully mitigate those individuals out and bring more individuals in that fit what's making you successsul.
It's the same thing. That's very similar with everything you do. Like, you learn from your mistakes. You don't want to just rinse and repeat. You want to put something in place that's actually working, and goes all back to the hiring process and, saving you time and saving your clients time is to
Yeah.
kind of learn from your mistakes.
Well, we'll talk about ROI, but I mean, if you really if you go even deeper to that, it could be the sources. If you're really monitoring where app flow is coming from, you could find that you're getting ghosted from a specific source. Back to Ross's point, if you're applying for 50 positions, are you getting the most qualified applicants through Indeed? Are you getting more qualified applicants from a different niche board that's out there that you don't even know is there? It could be from social platforms. There's all types of different reasons that sources could provide unqualified individuals. But if you can monitor that and you can manage it, then that will allow you to shift your dollars to the areas where you're getting the most qualified individuals that are showing up. So there are a lot of elements to it that you have to take into consideration.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good transition to the final topic I want to talk through. Is ROI. Money is the most important. As much as people don't want it to be, you want it to be the structured hiring process, saving time. But a lot of the decisions of these candidates, it does come down to money. So Ross, I want to start with you on compensating managers well, because managers are typically paid more. So want to hear your points on the importance of that.
Sure. This falls under a broader topic of just knowing, where it makes sense to invest in your business. And there's very few places in your business where you can look at it, as an essentialist and say, what's one decision I can make that would eliminate 1,000 others? And having a great manager in place does a lot for you. If you have a great one, everything's great. If you have a bad one, everything downstream is bad. And franchisors listening to this know this for the reasons that we listed earlier. It's like, it doesn't matter how great the process is and how great the playbook is, how much money you spend on marketing. If they're being sent into a location that's not executing well, all those dollars are wasted. I mean, your conversions on those new customers, horrible. So as a franchisee is thinking about this, and the best franchise operators know, I need great managers, they know to invest there. And they do that in a few different ways. The best operators will pay managers really well, and they'll structure comp in a way that is both highly competitive but profitable for them because it's performance-based. And a lot of franchisees early on will make the mistake, and we made this mistake, of either not paying enough or just arbitrarily paying more, but not structuring it in a way that drives the drivers of your business, the main KPIs. Once you've done that and you've paired it with a process to get top talent, the two work hand in hand. The more you pay, the better talent is available to you. The better talent you have, the better your performance is in the network. And they feed each other in a very positive way. The other part of this equation is just knowing when to use experts. I mean, there are very few places in your business where you have $100,000 liability or more. But I think about accounting or legal, you bring in an expert to do those things because a mistake can cost you a lot in direct and indirect cost. The same exact thing is true of your manager. If you hire a bad manager and you have to change that manager out, the numbers are that it costs you $100,000. That is direct and indirect costs, training and the time lost, the opportunity cost of the sales, the turnover that might happen with the rest of your team, morale issues. All of that is affected by this one decision of how much investment you've put into hiring a great manager. And so part of that investment is skipping the learning curve. If you don't have the process set up and you don't know what to look for in order to assess the best potential, then find a way to bring that into your organization. That is part of your role as an entrepreneur, finding the right resources and being resourceful. And frankly, this is why we started Epic Managers, because this didn't exist. It was frustrating to not have the option other than DIY. And so having a done for you option that exists gives you just one more tool in the tool belt to invest in this critical area that just affects the entire business. Mm-hmm. So that's why, this as an investment is one of the best things you can possibly do for your business.
And it's something that's so simple. Like pay your managers well, you get better quality. It's something so simple, but sometimes it's hard for, these new this entrepreneur starting a new business, put a lot of money into it. They're afraid to spend money, but it's thinking of it more in a long-term way of thinking is you spend more money now and you're gonna have less issues down the line.
Yeah, and I mean the PE guys that are involved in franchise now with all the roll-ups, they know this. I mean, they just intuitively know you need the best talent in the seat. And so they're not shy about spending in these areas. They're very competitive when it comes to managers. And so, like it or not, your competition is people that pay managers well, people that are Johnny on the spot, fast in terms of how they hire, making good decisions quickly. And that's the best possible investment you can make. I mean, when you are rolling up an organization that has 10 or 12 different groups in one giant PE roll up, you've got 10 or 12 different hiring processes they had. So getting through the backlog of managers that you might want to upgrade, let's say, it could take a while. It's impossible to resource that efficiently in an organization out of the home office. So having a mercenary that you can bring on to help you with that makes sense. And if you're a PE group and you have 100 locations, even the best in class guys will have 25 to 30% manager turnover. That's best in class. So at a minimum, you're probably turning over 30 managers in a year that you have to replace. And at worst, it could be 60 to 70 managers. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of hiring that has to be done. So you need tools. You need new tools to address stuff like that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's definitely very valuable for people to know. Neil, you briefly mentioned it, but I wanted to dive a little deeper on ROI and how it's just, obviously it's a very important metric to track. But want to just talk through the effects of franchisees having like a more disjointed hiring process, and just want to hear some like examples of kind of like what you've seen and like how they can kind of switch gears.
Yeah, I think it plays back to early on with what Ross said. I mean, individuals look at an applicant tracking system as an end-all be-all to being able to get people through and understand what's happening with the money that they're spending. When we built out our solution, it was to be the front end reporting to the ATS, because individuals looking at the ATS system for what it is, an individual comes in, they apply. How did you hear about us? They fill out the first thing. There's a human error element to how individuals are getting to that application. When you look at, and I say this a lot, we talked about, I think Anthony brought it up, the old way of how you applied. At one point in time, there was a straight line from an applicant to an application and then to the individual that was hiring. If you look at the landscape today, there are hundreds of ways an individual could land on your application. And so if you're not paying attention to what sources are driving that app flow, and not understanding, if that data is right or if it's a perception, then really you're wasting money. We pay a lot of attention to, what sources are driving, not only the sources themselves, but then what sources are turning into hires. And so it goes back to the time element. It goes back to hiring someone that knows what they're talking about. I mean, you and I talked about this a lot, Jake. I mean, we haven't had a client that we've ever brought on that's failed. And people think that that's so outlandish that I would say that, but there's a lot of elements that go into it. A lot of times individuals are just throwing money on a platform or with Indeed or whatever it might be. And then they're not paying attention to it. They're just complaining that it's not working. And so, the days of set it and forget it are over. You have to pay attention to where your money's being spent. You have to pay attention to what sources are bringing app flow. You have to pay attention to what sources are driving the qualified applicants. And then you have to adjust not only your money, but you have to adjust the messaging and what you're saying, because, the job board element is great for what it is. People are looking for a job. It's an easy way to apply. Anthony, I've had this conversation at length. But if you think about the full circle, what is your messaging on Facebook? What is your messaging on TikTok? What is your, and is that messaging relevant to the platform that it sits on? And are you using those platforms for what they're built for? And so if you're looking at it from, you know, a holistic stance, you know, what should happen is your quality, if you have money in all of those spots, if you can afford to do it, the quality of the applicant on Indeed or a job board should go up. And that's because people don't understand that I saw you on Facebook, I Googled you, and that, like, the algorithm inside Google does a really nice job of putting Indeed at the top. And so all of a sudden, you know, paying attention to the quality of your job board app flow can at least give you some unrealized benefit of the money that you're spending on other platforms. And we talk a lot about cause and effect. So understanding what $1 here means to $1 there. There's just a lot of things that individuals can do that doesn't take a lot of time, but it really just is just paying attention.
Yep. Be where your customer, your applicants are. That's the key. You know, Anthony, I want to end it with you on ROI as well. I know this is a big thing for all three of you guys. So just want to hear your points on ROI and how that plays a big role.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, everybody's made good points, you know, source attribution, you know, how complicated the touch points are or not in the hiring process. They all contribute to ROI, right? But I think you want to dial it back for just a second and say, you know, whenever you're putting a business plan in place, right, you're trying to accommodate for as many variables as you can and establish a goal, right? I'm going to invest X in this and my ROI expectation is Y. Right. But the most challenging part of that is, I think, trying to understand, identify, and mitigate the risk factors that can have an adverse impact on that. Right. You know, and when you look at sort of what we do, right, there's so many factors, you know, from job board performance to overall job board traffic, right, to talent, local market talent fluctuations. You know, competitors in your operating space, right? How many people are looking for the same, or how many organizations are looking for the same kinds of people that I am, right? And what does that do to the competitive nature of the marketplace, right? This is where, again, I say big data comes in, right? To be able to begin to offset some of those things, right? And we have some prediction tools that allow us to do that, you know, typically run in the 90 to 95% accuracy, you know, range, where, you know, driving towards predictability is a key factor in driving ROI, right? The more confident you are and be able to react to changing market conditions, right? That changes your strategy a bit, you know, and allows you to plan more effectively to drive that ROI. So, you know, I know I mentioned earlier, we can save time and money through automation and data insights. Imagine if you're able to claw back 30% of the time that your field staff is using on administering advertising and trying to figure out all these different market dynamics, and have those people be able to reapply that 30% into, you know, candidate care. You know, we were talking about customer experience. It's candidate care is really kind of the shift, right? You know, and you think about all these e-commerce players who know exactly what they're willing to spend to acquire a new customer, because they know what that customer is going to be worth over the next 12 months, right? That same logic can be applied to employee acquisition, not just customer acquisition, but understanding, you know, the impact of a better quality hire that comes quicker, sometimes at maybe a higher price to acquire that one, has much more significant long-term implications on the overall expense line to your business, right? So if we can take 5 points out of the front end for talent acquisition and candidate attraction, right, get higher quality candidates in the door faster, managers in particular, to Ross's point, right? You know, because they're like, I'm thinking about QSR space right now, right? You know, assistant manager, downward from assistant manager, there's going to be consistent high churn, right? Anywhere from 30 to 50% in those roles, right? If you can impact that by getting better quality candidates faster that change your average turnover, or excuse me, average tenure from 6 months to 9 months, you're saving money in the long run, you know, in all those other associated employee costs. So, you know, ROI has so many different factors. I think, you know, one of the things that we try to do is get to understand really the dynamics of how our customers run their business so that we can begin to influence those factors, you know, as we get closer and closer and closer in our relationships, you know. So, you know, ROI is a customizable metric, I think, you know, dependent upon the state of the organization that you're talking to. Does that make sense how I describe that?
100%. I think that was a really good full circle point. Kind of really addresses the whole theme of what we talked about. So I think that was a great way to kind of close things out. It makes a lot of sense. And, you know, ROI is a lot of different, it can go a lot of different routes, but in the end, it's, you know, whatever the amount of money you can have to drive more quality candidates in the door is going to help your ROI. Because you have them, like you said, have them longer tenure, spending more money on, you know, backfilling. All really important. Want to thank you guys for taking the time to do this. I think this is a lot of value. I think all the people that are watching are definitely going to be reaching out to you guys and at least bring a lot of good strategies and tactics to use for their business. So thank you guys so much. For everyone watching, I know this is a typical time, a busy time of year for when you're looking out for suppliers. Whether it's employee recruitment or anything else, go, like I said in the beginning of the call, go to FranchiseSupplierNetwork.com, fill out a needs assessment. We're happy to introduce to these folks and anybody else. Hope you guys all have happy holidays, and we'll talk soon. All righty.